This is the news. Shadowing. The wrestling basement, but in the science wants is something of celebrity. He's West Australia's first female chief scientist, and his passionate advice and keep scientists a classroom on our thing. Tomorrow she will turn the lights a day above birds become a fellow with the Australian Academy of Science. Conservation has been something but very dear to my heart. My name is Lindy Beasley. I call myself Science Ambassador. I live in Perth. I'm particularly proud I helped set up Dolphin Watch, which I consider to be one of the best scientific programs in the world. I'm the scientist of Western Australia, but the government wanted to make sure we did have the stable dolphin population. I haven't loved the water and the sea from the very early on. I'm an early child from place Gravesend. It's a town halfway between the London and the end of Thames Estuary. I went to state school and only just passed the exam to get into the school. And that's one of the reasons I'm so convinced I want to work with school kids who could get every opportunity. When at school, I had light moments where we visited Child Thurman's house. That was one of the huge school exposure we had. And I looked through this microscope at his specimens, and that was it. I wanted to be scientist and live my life in science. I think every single kid loves science. Most of them like dinosaurs from day one. They ask questions of their parents about why this moon up there, why does grass green? We have to keep that thirst for knowledge and that curiosity alive. So what are you doing in school? Me clean the rubbish then it does going to sandy ocean. I would love to see everyone embracing the needs for change, for climate change, and working for it. And even if the world believe in climate change, we don't want pollution. We don't want our ocean full of plastic. So let's look how we can make the world better. I managed to exit this Oxford University, I think, a bit like the slumber minister. I asked me on the question which I did answer. At Oxford Uni, there was a tab meant for every 1 moment student. So from the earliest time, I could see that gender balance make a big difference. My field of study was the brain. I went to one lecture and another doctor said it was just how to fix up the brain after injury. I thought it sounded so fascinating. Without hardcore work that the people in our field, they would know much less than the brain damage than recovery from damage. I've been lucky to have the speeches named after me. One is a sponge which has the potential to help people with a very attractive form of breast cancer. The second speech named after me is a fossil jar. I met my husband's British traveler when he was almost completing medical school in Edinburgh. We decided we are going to move to Australia. It's the best move. We have elements for science. I think no better place in the world. I've been elected a fellow of Australian Academy of Science. It's such an honor. It was seen as a recognition of life of my fine work in science, about science for science. People outside science should care about it because it's a big deal when it does mean is that in the Australian population, they have some of the most insane science on a global scale we can possibly manage. It means I can work with others who are really leaders in Australia to address issues that I think are really important or doing set issues that they have developed. I love the feeling at the end of the day when you had sees a fellow to think I made a least better difference for the world better than was the yesterday. And when I feel like that, I feel really good. One more. Professionally based in the name we had the host main, but inside the world she's something of deliberate. She's Western Australia's first female ship scientist and is passionate as Mexican's first science classroom among other things. Tomorrow she was doing the light that way that becomes the fellow with the Australian Academy of Science. Conservation has been something that I hold very dear to my heart. My name is Cindy Lee. I call myself Science Ambassador. I live in Perth. I'm particularly proud and have set up Dolphin Watch, which I consider to be one of the best citizen science programs in the world. As a ship scientist in Western Australia, the government wants to make sure we did have the stable dolphin population. Oh, look at that. I have the love of the water and the sea from very early on. I'm an early child from a place, Gravesend. It's a town halfway between the London and end of the town's street. I went to state school and only just passed the exam to get into the school. And that's one of the reasons I'm so convinced that I want to work with this school to give them every opportunity. When at school, I had lighting moments where we visited Charles Darwin's house. That was one of the history experts we had. And I looked through this microscope at its specimen, and that was it. I wanted science. I loved my life in science. I think every single kid loves science. Most of them like dinosaurs from day one, and they ask questions of their parents about why is it move up there? Why is the grass green? We have to keep that thirst for knowledge and that curiosity alive. So what do you think in school? We clean up the ocean and it doesn't go into the ocean. I would love to see everyone embracing the need for change, for climate change, and working for it. And even if you work or live in climate change, we don't want pollution. We don't want our ocean full of plastic. So let's look how we can make the world better. I managed to be accepted at Oxford University. I think a bit like the Slenderman. They asked me on the question to which I knew the answer. At Oxford Uni, there was 10 men for every one woman student. So from the earliest time, I could see that getting gender balance made a big difference. My field study was the brain. I went to one lecture on how the doctors say was research how to fix a brain and after injury, and I thought the sounds of all said so fascinating. Without her work, we are other people in our field. Then we were know much less about brain damage and recovery from brain damage. I've been lucky to have the species named after me. One is a sponge, which has the potential to help people with very intractable form of breast cancer. The second species named after me is a fossil shark. I met my husband Richard when he was almost complete medical school in Edinburgh. We decided we are going to move to Australia. It's the best move we have ever made for science. This is no better place in the world. That intellects a fellow of the Australian Academy of Science is such honor. It was seen as a recognition as a library from work in science, about science, and for science. People ask that science should go about it because it's big deal it does mean. It said, in the Australian population, we have some of the most summer global score we can possibly imagine. It means I can work with others who are really leaders in Australia to address issues that I think are really important or join them in issues that they have developed. I love the feeling at the end of the day when you had the feeling to think I made at least a big of difference for the world better than I was yesterday. And now I feel like I feel really good.